unforgivably immoral acts of killing, torture, successful strategic gamemanship, and idealism. Throughout the film, one is continually repulsed by what seems to be senseless murder of innocent people. The trouble, however, is what seems like senseless violence soon proves quite serviceable to what seem like laudable ideals, such as freedom and the right of determination. In particular, the FLN's violence garners the attention of the media and, by extension, the French people, including intellectuals like Sartre, and the United Nations. At what point an FLN spokesman touts the fact that the UN is preparing to consider the Algerian question. While the UN does not, in the end, choose to intervene, one cannot help but to recognize that it is the explosion of violence on the part of a subjugated people that forces the world to put the spotlight on the Algerian people's problem. Moreover, the head of the French military operations expresses esteem for his Algerian opponents, even praising the FLN's leadership's moral character. In the end, after violent public protests, Algerians finally succeed in liberating Algiers of French rule on July 2, 1962. However, reluctantly, we must conclude that violence succeeded in throwing off the chains of French colonialism, in this case, and helped bring about freedom, at least temporarily. While those of us in the privileged positions focus a great deal on the way in which we go about achieving our objectives, those who experience subjugation and or systematic exploitation often lack the luxury of contemplating proper means. So Fanon writes, for the Negro who works on the sugar plantation, there is only one solution: to fight. He will embark on this struggle, and he will pursue it not as the result of a Marxist or idealistic analysis, but quite simply because he cannot conceive of life otherwise than in the form of a battle against exploitation, misery, and hunger. And I'll just say in closing, public intellectuals have before them what I think is the consternating twofold dilemma of looking beyond the Enlightenment's prescription of rational critical debate in order to affect societal change. We're finding that it's not working right now. We have all the good reasons why the Iraq War should come to a close. We have all the good reasons why we know the Bush administration is committing torture, and yet those of us in this room are powerless, at least currently. First, they have the problem of finding an alternative to the traditional means of merely publishing and professing and protesting in order to influence their government. The task, it seems, is to work toward the Jeffersonian ideal of creating a society in which all have a real seat at the table to express, discuss, and decide. Second, those interested in both justice and preserving human life are faced with remedying the use of violent dissent, which is a reaction to the castration of civic action's potency. In particular, violent dissent presents us with a true moral dilemma. In it we see both ugly banality and beautiful humanity. It is proof of murderous idealism. It is proof of liberating idealism. It kills children. It frees children. It destroys. It creates. And despite the ambivalence, anyone who has ever fallen in love with liberty and justice understands that while revolution is often ugly, as in the case of the French Revolution, it is simultaneously invigorating and life-affirming. It gives us what can only be described as hope and confidence that we are not born in a predetermined world, that our actions do indeed mean something. Violent dissent, be it the direct violence of the American Revolution or the indirect use of violence by Martin Luther King's Civil Rights Revolution, is proof of life, spirit, idealism, of that uniquely human desire to make the world better than it is. It is much more difficult to honestly describe imperial wars of aggression and colonialism in this way. Clearly, anyone who values human life wishes to avoid its destruction. We must, however, do more than condemn the use of violence in order to preserve life. We must consider the motives of those who use force and contemplate the validity of their grievances. So if we wish to avoid the often destructive and inhumane consequences of violent dissent, we must address the basic fact that at least a persistent and dedicated portion of people refuse to forsake public freedom to some distant patriarchal representative. They refuse to merely conform to Foucault's panoptical promise or the disciplinary society erected by a powerful minority of men. If peace is our true aim, then we must do more than merely criticize the unauthorized uses of violence and work to create a society in which the public, not merely the powerful, can engage in the activities of freedom, expression, discussion, and decision. Until all feel as though they are at least seated at the table and participating in the process of molding society, violent dissent will not only continue, but also signal that people have not yet become compliant robots. Thanks.
Thank you. And